don't run the marathon in let's say 10 minutes. You are there for 2 hours and you are steady and you train for it. That is what this is. This is a marathon, dear colleagues. Now, I'll mention a few things. Is it a problem? Well, it is a problem for the reason I didn't mention it, but I kind of alluded to it. When we looked at MV Kenya, the first slide that I showed, there was that debt issue. And I say debt is used to stabilize MV Kenya. So for instance, when we were going through the COVID-19 and basically we couldn't raise that much revenues, etc., the only way we could get away with it was to borrow. So we borrowed concessional funds from the IMF, the World Bank. You know, it is 20, 30, 40 years repayment, 2%, actually less than 2% interest, etc. So very concessional. And that's how, so in a sense, it's like you also, you know, when you're in a tight spot and you want to, so you can borrow a bit, but you want to be sure that you don't overborrow. So here's the case, and even personally, when you borrow, you have to get to a point where you say, oh, wait a second, I think I've overborrowed. And I need to be careful and begin to repay this, maybe begin to repay the more expensive debt, etc. But I think the first thing that happens is when you begin to, your repayment becomes a large share of your revenues. And this applies, for instance, if you borrow mortgage, right, a mortgage, right? You know, and I'm sure, well, maybe it's not you, but the people that come to you, the people that work for you, and you advise them, you tell them, don't borrow. I mean, your repayment should not be more than a third of your income. There's a general rule. This is a general rule, financial sort of management. 30%, right? No more than that should be going to repayment of loans, etc. So if you do that for the country, you get this so revenues is what we are earning, that's our income. And then debt service, yeah? So you can see there was a time it was 33%. It came down to 16, 15%. And now it's up, you know, in the 50% range, above 40%. So clearly we are tight, yeah? So every shilling that we collect in revenues, 40 cents, or every 100 shillings, 40 shillings go to debt service. So you begin to ask yourself, but wait a second, what about salaries? What about medicine? What about building roads? So the point is, like, you would also need to worry about this. If you had this problem personally, you sort of say, hey, wait a second, I do need to, I'm not at a point where I'm falling, I'm collapsing, but surely I need to do something about this. So it's a bit like you or me when you go to the doctor and the doctor tells you, you know, you're doing well, but you need to exercise more frequently. Yeah? And you don't like the exercise, but you need to do it. Otherwise, things will be worse in a year's time, etc. So that's really gives you a good snapshot as to where it is. I wanted to give you also a sense of where things are relative to other countries, but this I'll do very quickly. And it is this slide. The blue is the advanced economies. So generally, advanced economies can carry debt much higher than us. So Japan, you know, etc. They can all go much higher for many reasons. These are discussions that we economists love to engage in. But I think as of others, say emerging markets, lower, and sub-Saharan Africa, even less. Meaning our debt carrying capacity is not at the level of the others. And I think it's understood, right? Again, using the analogy of running the marathon. If I haven't trained enough, I cannot really keep up with Kipchoge. And Kipchoge will stay for 2 hours and he's running very fast. I cannot keep up with him even for 1 kilometer. And now if you have trained a lot more, you can stay with him for a little longer. So I think that's the sense. We can discuss it, but I wanted to tell you that not all countries have the same carrying capacity, and that is important for you to appreciate. What are the economic consequences of high debt? You know this, but I thought I would at least remind you. First, it narrows the fiscal space. So I explained it in the context of you cannot, you have less room for other expenditures. And that is very important for you. Yeah? It's very important because your job is not just to repay debt. Your job is to make sure that the lives, and my job as well, is to actually affect the lives of the 50 million Kenyans that we are responsible for, that have given us the respective mandates. So that is important. Then, of course, it limits the room. We call it fiscal buffers, but it just means that at times you need to allow yourself to spend more than you are bringing in as in revenues. So like during COVID, we needed to spend more, but we didn't have room, so we had to borrow. So that sort of counter-cyclical policy, which is extremely important, is that room is limited. But importantly also, it increases the interest rate structure, or rather interest rate, basically. It raises interest rate, meaning you become, people are less interested in lending to you. You become higher risk from their perspective. And I think the point is that will end up ruining many things, including innovation, productivity, etc. Balance of payments. This is now talking about external. Again, this is the other, let's say, the other sale that I talked about, external sector. We've talked about the fiscal. I'm now talking about the external, and I'll talk towards the end about the financial. Exports have been growing okay, actually, quite strongly. Growing around 15%, over the, but I think specifically if you look at them, 2021, 2022, the only one that looks a bit odd is horticultures. And horticultures, actually the problem there was avocados. I'm an avocado farmer, and I know a lot about avocados. And the problem I understand is it's the exports of these things, right? It is, there was a problem with China now that has been fixed, so we expect this to reset itself, although I'm told that the problem with avocados is they've been stolen, yeah? So you go to the farm and somebody was there before you the night before, I don't know how this works, but anyway, let's leave the avocados alone. And then imports have also been growing well, yeah? And I think it is important to note the largest growth was from oil, petroleum. Again, remember I showed you the graph of how high the price of oil had gone. So basically, oil has been the one that has been driving, pushing, even as exports have grown, imports have grown even more because of oil. Yeah? The others you can see, chemicals, manufacturers, all of them are showing that the economy is dynamic, meaning the economy is moving well, but I think the issue here is the drag from the imports of oil in various ways, as I explained. Diaspora remittances are an important component. That has been growing very well. This actually really helped us during COVID. Our fellow Kenyans out there sending money home, that has been strong. Now, I know the last few months, there has been, let's say, a stabilization, and indeed last month a decline, modest decline from 312 to 310 million US dollars in the month. And the reason for that is twofold. One is there's a general, let's say, seasonality. It will pick up as we go into the next, into October, November, December, as we do that, right? So there's seasonality, people sending money home according to the season, towards Christmas, school fees, those sort of things. I think we understand that. But another thing which we have seen, not just about Kenyan remittances, it's actually globally, is that the people in the remitting countries, and in particular the US, they are sending less money home because they're under a lot of economic pressures themselves. So the cost of living for them has really pushed them hard. But anyway, just something to note, and at this point we are still grateful to our brothers and sisters, wherever they are, that they are sending these remittances, which remain, they are much more important than any of our exports. Tea, coffee, horticulture, much more important. And I think that it is good to see that they still have a connection with our country. This is a long-term item that we need to talk about. Tourism is picking up. I think this, I don't want to say too much in the interest of time, but I think it has picked up quite well. And there was a time recently that I'm sure you couldn't get any place in any of the hotels in the coast or even in Masai Mara, etc. So those numbers are coming on okay. What is the bottom line? The bottom line here is that the current account balance, which is what puts everything together, so exports, imports, remittances, everything, then you have a balance, sort of like the bottom line, has been, we have a deficit relative to the GDP of about 5, for this year we are projecting, well, last year it was 5.5% of GDP. And to July it's 5.1, and we are projecting that to be 5.9. Now, I always make the point that the sweet spot for us is 5%. So we are a bit on the higher side, but it's around where it should be. So 5.9 isn't a problematic thing, particularly because we are financing it through other means, capital inflows, portfolio inflows, etc. And you can see, as we say, tumetoka mbali. Look at 2014. Yeah, 2014 was almost 10%, and even the year before. So I think the point I'm making here is that the current account is in relative balance, and the next slide shows you where we are on the foreign exchange. You can see in terms of US dollar equivalent, it had peaked at 8.8 billion, and now it is at 7.3 billion. But this is still like 4.3 months of import cover, which is relatively adequate. But you can see it has fallen from 5.2, 5.3, but we maintain it at around where it is, not so much because we are targeting anything, but because this is we in the central bank generate these reserves through the government's loans. So the government borrows in US dollars, and then we repay their loans in US dollars or foreign currency, and that's how we generate our foreign exchange. It is adequate, etc. The question which you have is, and you have been asked by others, but wait a second, why is the shilling falling? So, is it falling? Yes, it is falling. Is it falling dramatically? And that's where the issues are. Now, there's a slide that I'm showing you, which is it shows you the major currencies against the US dollar. So you can see all those reds, all those currencies, they are depreciating against the US dollar. And if you do one index of the major currencies against the US dollar, it's that index on the left, the green one that says 14.4. Basically, the US dollar has been strengthening dramatically against all other currencies. So the US dollar is on one side and everyone else is going down. That is, I think, politically, and Speaker, you'll forgive me if I dabble into political words. That is the US economy might. Yeah? I said economy, I was going to use politics, There's a word about it, yeah? This is so in a sense, this is the imperial aspect of the US dollar. That's the politics I wanted to avoid, but I think you allow me to just say that. So yes, so you have the dollar strengthening against everybody else. Sure, even the euro, the pound, 14, 15%. So I think the point here is we have to understand what is going on in all the markets. So when we ask ourselves, why is Kenya? Then we have this slide, which is our countries, or rather African currencies. And you can see that we are the circled one, we are at 6.2, so we have depreciated, and this is January to date. So we depreciated by 6.2. However, you have others, you have the Uganda shilling, it is 7.7, Egyptian pound, Kwacha and Sedi, you can see them on that side. And then on the other side, you have the Tanzania shilling, Nigerian naira. We can discuss each of these currencies, where they are coming from, obviously offline, because a lot of it, there are other things that are going on, such as where they were last year. So for instance, when you look at the Zambian kwacha, which is appreciated by 7.6, last year actually it has depreciated like by 20% plus. So it is in a sense correcting after that. So I'm making the point that we are in the middle of the road, 6.2, and I think in some sense what we are trying to do is to avoid significant movements in the currency. So what we do is we allow it to move according to market forces, but we intervene to minimize the volatility. Volatility is what ruins everything. So we want to make sure that whatever happens, it depreciates or appreciates, gently, without any sort of significant, so that you can plan better, as opposed to it moving in one day by 2% or 10% or whatever else it is. So I just wanted to make the point, because this is an accusation that has been leveled against us in the central bank, that we are in some ways throttling the foreign exchange market. That's not true. What has happened is that at times the banks have been misbehaving. They don't always follow the rules. And so yes, we have had to deal with them to make sure that they follow the rules. They have certain responsibilities as in the market that they have to follow. For instance, make sure that they have two-way pricing, make sure that they provide minimum quotes for $500,000 US dollars, etc. So if that works well, then the market itself will provide itself with let's say the balance. It will be self-correcting and we won't have an issue. But I think the point is that particularly as we are coming into the elections, there are obviously some people that had other ideas, and they were trying to, in a sense, benefit from the fears that you have, that I have, that everyone else has, and in a sense, that's what we were, let's say, opposing in terms of making sure that the markets operate as they should. I want to finish quickly, so I'll skip some of these other slides. Just a word on this slide. The national payment system is so important to us. And we as Kenyans want to improve this national payment system. And we want to have a secure, fast, efficient, and collaborative payment system that benefits all Kenyans. And so there are some things we've done. We have a strategy which we can discuss, but it's available on our website, etc. I want to say a few words about banking before I finish, but maybe even I'll skip this financial inclusion slide. Let's go to the vision of the banking sector. And I'm happy to see some faces I recognize that we discussed some time ago, the maneno of interest rate caps. If you remember, we were adamant, we had differences of views, etc. We put it in place, you put it in place, and we told you it wouldn't work. It didn't work. We told you that there were some things that we needed to do. We put them in place, in particular this thing of the vision of the banking sector. And this vision is important because we say that we want I'm not going to go into all the details, but we want a responsible and disciplined sector. So customer centricity is very important, which is a big issue. It was one of your key issues. And actually, as Kenyans, you know, we all want to be treated with respect. Customer centricity. The thing of risk-based pricing, this is important. Because if you went to a bank, they should not just look at you and say, well, okay, you are 12% or you are 23%. It has to be based on the risk of the project. And I think this is the big thing that we have been pushing them towards. And they are getting there. They need to, it's like learning a new language. You don't start knowing it. You do it in, you know, kidogo kidogo. Transparency in terms of interest rates, what they're charging, and also ethical banking. So that is a journey that we have already, that took off in 2019, and we have already begun to see significant benefits from it. For instance, how do I know this? Well, you know it. During COVID, if you had a loan that was performing, you could go to your bank and renegotiate and get a new loan or reduce the terms, etc. You know, we've never, in the 56 years that we have been in MV Kenya has been sailing, that had never happened before. That a banker has you sort of say, okay, you're making your loans, but you know, we can, you know, tutasaidia kidogo, and then they changed it a little, etc., to benefit you. And I think this is something that we should appreciate. Would never have happened if the banks had not changed their outlook and felt that they have a responsibility to you as customers and to the country itself. I'm about to finish. The banking sector, growth in credit. I don't want to talk too much about this, but just to mention that actually it is now credit is available. It is true there are concerns. Some of you ask, well, they are lending to government, so they are crowding out private sector. That's not true. Yeah, they still have lending capacity, and they can lend you appropriately if you talk to them. Now, I want to finish, but really to mention just two things. Maybe not this one, but the next one, the slide of, no, that one, yeah. Because I'll send the slides to you, you look at it. So if I were to ask myself, what are the areas that we need your support in? Yeah, I think the first of this is we have a microfinance bill that we have, will be bringing to Parliament. And really this is meant to strengthen the microfinance sector. We have to move from the old-fashioned microfinance. We need to go to microfinance, in my view, I call it 3.0, as opposed to where we are now, which is microfinance 1.0. So we'll bring that bill, we'll explain it to you. I think it is important in terms of reaching to some of the unbanked, and particularly if you also have this digital sort of platforms, etc. The other one is a big one, which is the designation of lawyers. This is all regarding the anti-money laundering sort of issues. And I think this is where we have to appreciate that we as a country, and we are not going to say why, we can discuss it offline, but we as a country have been, let's say, we've not followed what everyone else, including our neighbors, Uganda, Tanzania, Mauritius, whatever, have done. And this is a standard thing that we should be doing, which is designating lawyers as reporting persons. And this is something that was discussed in Parliament, and I'm pretty sure it will come back to you. At this moment, there is a stay because somebody, I guess, petitioned about its appropriateness, etc., and so it's stuck in the courts, but we do need your support here. And more generally, strengthening the anti-money laundering, combating of financing terrorism, the framework on that. And that is because we have just recently done the sort of a national assessment, national risk assessment, and also done what is known as a mutual evaluation of our implementation of our policies, which we would expect that you would support us in various ways. So, I'm about to finish. there has been some recent reviews of our economy. The things I said before obviously indicate some areas of that we need to work together, not just the people in this room, but I think also others, you know, the entire, all arms of government, let's put all arms and all elements in government. But I think recently there were 2 reviews, and I want to leave you with this, which is a review by the IMF that was concluded in July. This is just before the elections. And they concluded that there was a strong recovery underway and that we were implementing the right policies. Remember, it's ourselves that chose those policies. That is one of them. And then more recently, one of the rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, affirmed Kenya's rating, foreign and local currency sovereign rating at B. And the outlook is stable. Now, this is against the backdrop of them, let's say, revising down other countries that you know of. I'm not going to name them, but so I think the point for me is are we sort of in the ditch completely, irretrievably? The answer is no. Is there work to do? A lot. Do we know what we want to do? I think we do. I think we need your support. I think we need support by every person. All the 50 million Kenyans we need to rally around specific things, and we talked about some specific areas that need our specific push. And at the end of it, you know, at the end of your term, in 5 years, we'll look back and see how far MV Kenya has sailed and how much the dashboard has changed in terms of the people. We talked about all those measures, but I think at the end of the day, in terms of the people. As I finish, I want to put out a simple example, which is, you see, it's not just about policies. You know, one of the things that we talk about is poor people need to get money, give them money, etc. But I want to give you an example of a project that was started by KCB, and they were working, this is like maybe 3 years ago, a bit more, 4 years ago, and they were working with the Makueni County, and it was about raising chicken. So they provided financing to raise chicken. The chicken was being raised by, the smallholders, people who, Makueni, you understand, smallholder. By the way, I've told this to the former governor, Kibwana, and he was very excited about it when I told him about it, because I knew a lot about this. Anyway, the point was that they get the chicken, day-old chicken, they feed them, they are given feed, they are given the food to feed the chicken, they are given veterinary services, support services. I don't know how many weeks it takes. And then after those many weeks, somebody comes, buys them, or takes them away from them, and then slaughters them, of course, and they ended up in Carrefour. That's where they were being sold. The interesting thing is every farmer in this whole process, this chain that was there, was getting something like 11,300 Kenya shillings per month. And these are people who didn't have anything before. And that project, they started at 300 people, they ended up at 3,500. It had expanded to Kitui, to Kirinyaga, and I think Embu, those counties. The trouble is now it has fallen apart. We can discuss why it fell apart, but I think while it was running, you can imagine what 11,300, what that means to a family that doesn't have coffee, doesn't have anything else but that. And it was not financed. It was not financed by itself. It was finance plus, meaning they're supporting them. That, I think, is one of the things that, in my view, is a good demonstration of what you can do in your respective counties, in your respective jurisdictions, because you want to uplift the livelihood of the people that depend on you. Thank you very much. And I have Kipchoge there because I have a lot of respect for him. And actually on Sunday, he'll be trying to break the marathon record. Let's watch. Yeah. I can take questions, please.
Any questions to the governor?
Oh,
But before that, can we give him a round of applause, please? For that candid talk. Many, many questions, Governor.
It's okay. Let's start then.
Let's have, I give you a number, so when one finishes, the other goes. Governor, how many can you take at a go before we go?
Let's take, why don't we begin with 4? Let's
4.
Yeah.
So can I have number 1 here? I'll give it to the lady from Nakuru. Number 2 here, the gentleman in the honorable member in the middle. You'll identify yourself as you ask. Number 3, I'll give to Kimani Ichung'wa. Number 4, I'll give to the hand at the back, somewhere in the middle. The honorable member. Okay, number 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's start.
Okay, thank you.
We'll do all of you, so don't worry. Governor, looks like you will stand there for a little while.
But I'll also come back, so I hope it's not all questions for all time. Please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker and Dr. Jeroge. My name is Joseph Munyoro. I'm from Kigumo constituency. I have only 2 questions. I think there's an issue you've mentioned about the GDP. And you say you've mentioned it before about GDP growth, while on the street everybody is complaining. I think that's an area you need to explain in layman's terms so that people can be able to explain and understand where that comes from. I've also noticed from your presentation that China is the only country that's been able to bring their inflation from about 5.56% to 2.5%. And I'm wondering whether there is any lesson from that and whether we are implementing it in our case here in Kenya, because all other countries, the inflation is rising. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next, number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm Honorable Liza Chelule from Nakuru County. You've spoken about some bills that need some consideration from the National Assembly. For the purpose of assisting the unbanked and underbanked people at the community level. Which bills are these and which are, can we have a list of microfinances at the community level? The reason why I'm asking this, Mr. Governor, is because of so many sufferings that women at the community level have been suffering because of the high interest of microfinances that they every time apply for. Thank you.
Number 3.
The last part, I'm sorry, I got distracted.
Lisa, could you?
The last part, just the last part. You said women.
The reason why I'm asking this, Governor, or Mr. Governor, CBK Governor, is because women who are the most busiest people at the community level doing all sorts of businesses. They have been taking loans from microfinances and they are charged high interest. So we, for the purpose of creating awareness at the community level, we want to know who are these microfinances. I know a few, we need to get the list, and what is the bill that you would want the National Assembly to consider?
Thank you, thank you.
Number 3.
Thank you so much. I'm CPA Julius Ruto, Member of Parliament, Keses. I know, Governor, we had engagement last time if it was engaged. Now, basic question I'm asking. I've noted of late, there is no much supply of Kenyan denomination, the lowest notes. Does it mean, are we losing confidence on Kenyan denomination? because banks now very little supply of the lowest denomination. The other issue you never mentioned about in the aspect of subsidy, because now Kenyans have been taken up and down on the issue of subsidy on fuel. You've just shown us inflation on fuel, but we don't understand much about this. Thank you so much.
When you say supply, what?
The Kenyan denomination.
Kenyan denomination.
It's out of stock.
I understand.
In the banks. Thank you.
Okay.
Number 4.
Thank you, Governor. You've spoken about the anti-money laundering work that you have done at CBK. And you know you have had a long-standing debate with the National Assembly.
Yes, sir.
On the question of the national payment system, instances where I can't do even a check of above 1 million shillings. I have to do 999,000. And also the issues of that, in a big way we feel you've been stifling trade by limiting the amount of money that one can either withdraw or deposit in their bank accounts. I want to hear what CBK is doing. And most disturbing is the fact that CBK has allowed a very unfair and unequal system in the banking sector, where I can walk into certain banks today, withdraw whatever amount of money I want, whereas in others, I have to get a letter even from my grandmother and anybody else I could get from to explain why I'm withdrawing the money or where I'm taking it, or even deposit. Yet in some banks, you can do that. Maybe you need to do something at CBK to create a fair playing field. If rules are there for up to 1 million shillings or up to 999,000, it should be across the board for all in the banking sector. 2 is the digital space. And I know you have had efforts to regulate the digital lenders, but I would really have wanted to hear what you have done more so to deal with the predatory lenders in the digital space, because this, again, is something that has really punished many of our small-scale traders that are borrowing at rates that even governments cannot be able to borrow at, either from the domestic or the international markets. And I've seen you from some of the interventions you expect to get assistance from the National Assembly or from Parliament is a bill on microfinance. I don't know whether that encompasses also the digital lenders or it's microfinance banks, or does it also cover regulation of the digital money lenders? Lastly, over the last 2-3 months, there has been a debate in the media on whether there is or there are adequate foreign exchange reserves in the country, and whether CBK has been rationing the amount of dollars or foreign currencies that people can use. And I've heard you in the media say that there are enough dollars in the market, but those dollars are also not available to traders in the banks. Is it that banks are holding dollars and CBK is unable to regulate banks to make sure that they don't hold dollars, or what really is the problem? Or would you be kind enough to tell us, Kinaga Ubaga, do we have enough dollars in the market?
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Those are the 4.
Governor, those are the first
Thank
4.
you. Thank you very much, and thank you for all the questions. Maybe begin from Honorable Kinyoro's. I hope I got your name right. Munyoro, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. So yes, the question you had is, yes, GDP numbers, but people are complaining. So there is this issue which I kind of alluded to, which is you cannot eat GDP. That is my rough way of answering it. So even we as economists, even as we kind of get excited about growth rates and charts and all that, at the end of the day, it is what do I take home? So there are 2 problems here. First, GDP is the income for all of us. All of us, the entire country. You know, we could say that this section are getting a lot of the share, the bigger share of the cake. and these other ones are not getting much. That is the first problem. Actually, COVID around the world has increased the inequities that we have seen in economies. So we are not talking just Kenya. I'm not talking of the COVID billionaires and millionaires, but I hope you can protect me, right? You know, this, whatever I say here remains without.
You are protected, Governor. Sema ukweli yote.
Thank you. So there are people that became very rich during COVID. But where were the others? Where were the others? There are people who lost their businesses, they got closed, etc. That's what you hear. So inequities, or should we say inequalities, have become larger, not less. And that is an important thing. When you think about inequities or inequalities, you also think about inequalities about opportunities. So for instance, when they say when I complain or you complain or somebody comes to you and complains, you know, they had a bill, as I said, of somebody. One of the most, I'm like you, yeah? You are an important member of our community. When all this was going on, how many people came to you asking for money to bury somebody? It wasn't one, I'm sure. And this is not the harambe that we always do. You know those harambes, right? No, it is because people needed, they were a serious need. And then you give your pickup, you do this, you do all those other things, because people are in serious need. A lot of you also did things like provide food, yeah? We talked about Kipchoge. He actually provided a whole bunch of the runners, because they were not getting any money and they had run out of money. He gave them something to sustain on. So that is what you hear. And I think it is important to appreciate that they are not wrong when they complain. It's only that maybe we get too focused on that bottom line and not realize that actually that number can hide a lot of other things that we need to deal with. So that's my rough answer, and I think you can see where we're going with that. You talked about China inflation. China, the problem is not inflation. The problem is growth in China. They used to grow at 10%. Yeah? I remember when, a few years ago, when we were working in a different life, 7% was sort of like their bottom line, sort of like minimum. Yeah? That's the floor. 7%. Where are they now? This year they'll be less than 5%. I mean, if that is not an earthquake, I don't know what is. And this is all done by COVID. So inflation is not a problem there. But since the entire economy came to a crashing halt, their growth rate is the one that is now a big problem. And I don't know, they did have a big meeting recently, I think 2 days ago. I don't know what came out of it, but I'm curious to find out what they said about growth. But at the same time, China growth, they have a big issue, which is a bubble in the building industry. So they have been building all this, so the buildings, and mainly residential buildings, and they've just been growing like mushrooms everywhere, and banks were financing it. Now that whole growth model has come to a halt, and they have to deal with the weak banks that actually now cannot, that are sort of on the ropes because of this sort of bubble, which will soon burst if they're not careful. So there are problems in China as well. And I think we have to learn, and I take your point, let's learn from everybody and avoid those mistakes that maybe would be very expensive. So thank you for your points. Now, the Mheshimiwa from Nakuru, I didn't get your name, but it's okay. You make this point about women at, the issues that you face, and I'm sure you have very detailed examples on this, high interest, etc. I think we are dealing with it in two ways. First is to make sure that the institutions that are lending according to risk, right? So, for instance, the women that go to, let's say a lady who has a certain business, and she's been doing that business. You could even think of hair salon or whatever, and she's very good at it, etc. Why shouldn't she get additional financing so that she can expand it a little? Yeah. So it is because she's been there for a while. She is good risk, and that the bank has to accept that as her history as such. The biggest problem, to be honest, about why women don't get as much credit and etc., or maybe at times get very high interest, is often because banks end up asking for security. Yeah, I have many examples about this. They ask for titles, and that is a problem. I don't need to say any more. Yeah? In our society today, not many women have titles. It is, Niabwana, title Niabwana, So we have issues there. So I think the point here is why we are so pushy, or we are pushing this thing of improving the, let's say, the banking sector, the way they lend with, and we have indicated through our banking sector culture, charter, so that these issues can be dealt with. So it isn't, the most important issue isn't the institution as such. It is the things that hold the women back from being brought into the financial space in a full way. One of the things we'll be doing, and we have been working towards this, is also so that we can have, let's say, portable credit or credit rating, right? So today and now, actually we've done this. In CRBs, at times they end up treating you in a negative way. By the way, we've made progress. I'm not going to say too much about this, but we've made a lot of progress, more than, say, has been acknowledged, but that's okay. I think we want to have these conversations. But we want to get to a point where actually a good borrower, meaning one that repays, can actually benefit from that and have a lower interest rate for future lending. So it's not just about women as such, yeah? It is really about some of the things that hold them back, and that's what we are trying to fix. I would want to have conversations with you in the future, and I'm willing to even have conversations with some of your groups to suggest ways and how to deal with this. I'm willing to also talk to some of the banks. Some of the banks actually have been doing some specific programs for women. And actually, to be honest, those programs are doing very well. So we could have some offline conversations at the right time. There was a question about, by the way, also it's an issue of information. We need to put out information, and I do acknowledge that we need to do better in this. Then there are two questions about the Kenyan denomination, and the first thing, of course, is to apologize to our chair, the speaker, because he asked a question right at the beginning and I forgot. I'm sorry about that. The quality of the currency, and then also the availability of Kenyan denomination currency. I think the first on the availability, I want to be very explicit about this. We have more than enough pieces of paper, currency, for the country. More than enough in all denominations. So it's the banks that need to request. What happens, frankly, is at times a particular bank, right, in, let's say, mind you, we are not talking, let's say, ABSA. It's not ABSA in general. You're talking ABSA Kisi, or you're talking, whatever, a particular branch, this road in Thika, that branch. They may not be good enough in terms of making their requests. It's just like any supermarket. You may go there and you find they don't have bread, but there's bread available elsewhere. But for some reason, when they ordered, they didn't order enough. And so there's a bit of, let's say, planning problem with some of the banks. And this we've seen, particularly as you were doing your elections, right? There was a lot more demand of some of those currencies, and therefore, at times they got it wrong. But I want to assure you that that is not a problem that should be with you, because it's really, and it's going to be resolved as things. As a matter of fact, at this moment, we are seeing a lot more currency coming into the central bank as opposed to going out. So I think the point I'm making here is that we will this balance will be resolved quite quickly. The question about quality of currency, Bona Speaker, this was a concern a little earlier. Today and now, if you go out there, I am willing to take a bet that you won't see dirty currency, yeah? Or there'll be very little dirty currency. And the point is that we listened to you, and we did our work with the banks quietly, making sure that whatever is there is clean and of high quality. So I think the point I'm making is at the beginning there were concerns, and for several reasons, one of which is the way people are treating it, but I think also the way the currency had sort of been put out, etc. But today and now, that problem has kind of subsided, and I haven't seen it. And again, as I say, we are seeing the currency that's coming back, you understand, from all over, you know, after your campaigns. We are seeing it coming back. So we know what we are talking about. Then what else? The issue about credit and subsidies, etc. I don't know who answered that question. These are things that we need to discuss a lot more. Why? Because it's not a one-sided thing. It's true, as the president said, and again, as you asserted, any subsidy is a cost. It's a subsidy, but at the same time, it's a cost in the sense that somebody needs to be taxed somewhere to cover that subsidy. So that balance is one that needs to be struck. And I think also there's another side of it, which is when the subsidy is removed, prices will rise, as happened with the super petrol, and therefore that will be reflected in inflation. And there will be knock-on effects. Matatus will increase their prices. I'm told that now they've increased on the Thika Road and other places, Narok, I don't know. The point I'm making is there are other considerations, and that's why it is important to have a complete 360-degree view about subsidies, etc. But the bottom line is subsidies are generally temporary. They work if it is temporary, but with time, they end up creating serious distortions in the markets, and that's why it is important to deal with them. A few questions by our Mheshimiwa Ichungwa. We've had a lot of conversations, even remember in Bali, that famous room. We've come a long way, haven't we? I think this is something, your questions are valid, okay? I think the point here is that the conversation about the 1 million, you call it the 1 million limit. We don't think of it as a limit, but anyway, that whole thing. As I explained recently, this is something that we as central bank are working on. Why? To improve it. It's not working the way it should, because it's being used in some sense to punish you. Yeah, in a sort of, and you talked about even-handed or even playing field. I don't know, I wrote here even playing field. I don't know whether that's the word you had. And even that, there's a problem with it. It should be straightforward. It should be straightforward in the sense that, you know, my favorite example is the petrol station attendant. Yeah, so I own a petrol station, and I get, I don't know, 2 million every 2-3 days. I deposit it. When I go to the bank, they know that I own that petrol station. So why is it that they keep asking me, where did I get the money? Where did I get the money? you know. And even the banker filled his car at my petrol station. So in some sense, there has to be, let's say, some sanity in the way they deal with the customer. The KYC, know your customer, needs to be properly KYC. That they know you, they know that I run that petrol station and every so often I bring in 2 million, etc. And so those sort of issues need to be dealt with. The other things, which is, I'll mention it and then move on, but the one that really bothers me as well is, and again, this is an example, you go to a bank, the bank has a policy. Let's say ABSA, right? It has a policy. And you go to ABSA Queensway or ABSA Westlands, and let's say you are depositing money there. And yeah, 1 million, they have no problem with it, right? Then let's say somebody else is depositing 1 million in ABSA Kitui or Kajiado. You know, the manager can say, hey, 1 million, he is Taguza, where? And Anazo. You understand? So the manager is becoming a petite whatever, right? He's changing the rules by himself. And that gentleman that depositor has no recourse, in a sense. So we are trying to put some sanity there, but I think we need to do it correctly because we don't want to undo some of the things that have helped us, yeah? But we do understand it's an issue of customer pain points. That's the word I use, pain points that we need to deal with, understand them and deal with them. And we've done some work already. We do hope to see the benefits of those going forward. The last point you had was about adequate foreign exchange. I want to again assure you that yes, we do have adequate foreign exchange. What was happening is in the 2-3 months, you had people that were, again, trying to bring us back to golden bug. I want to say that again. People that wanted to bring us back to golden bug. And if you remember what was happening in golden bug, this is what some of the people are pushing towards. I don't want to get into the details because, you know, they will ask me, where's the proof? Yeah, and I'll say, well, I don't have proof. You know, I'm not DCI. So, but I think the point I'm making is the hype, the pressures had nothing to do with what was happening in the markets. And what was happening is, okay, you do have some rogue traders in particular banks, and they are working to do their thing, right? And so we went after those, and we've dealt with some of them. Now, you cannot kill every single mosquito in the room, but I think the point is you have to deal with it, yeah? And I think that's the sanity. But I think also part of that was obviously, you know, we were in a particular kipindi, you know, politics, etc. So everything was politics. But now that we are on the other side, I think there'll be better appreciation. And I can already assure you that sanity has returned. I mean, even right actually from the beginning of, you know, from the announcement and indeed even the recent decision by the Supreme Court, you can actually just see the numbers and you can see, you know, the thing is coming down to where it should be, yeah? What it should be. Obviously, it won't happen in a day, but we are getting there. And thank you for your support.
Good. Can we do another round of 4? Yes. I'll start from here again.
Chair.
Yes.
There's one thing I forgot. He asked, Honorable Ichunga asked about the digital.
Yes.
I want to tell you that, yes, this has been a long journey that we started quite some time ago, and we owe a lot of a tribute, or let's say, to Honorable Oyo. Remember him? Who passed away. I forget his name, first name, but you know him from Kisii, yeah? Because he's the one who pushed us quite hard, or worked with you and ourselves. And this was one of the bills that was brought to Parliament, etc. And in the end, the chair, then it was Honorable Waga, pushed it over the finish line, etc. So we've done what we should have done this year. And yesterday, on the 17th, of September, that was Saturday, we actually began, we finished that process of the first batch of, let's say, approving, licensing the digital credit providers. And today we issued a press release, which you can see on your phone, indicating that we have now started this. To be honest, there were 288 of these people that came to us, 288. Just imagine the mess that those people are creating. We approved 10. You ask why? What happened to all the others? Partly because the others were playing maneno, right? You ask them questions, they don't answer, yeah? So we do understand, it's now they're on the other side. You understand what I'm saying? So now they have to play according to the rules. We are not just going to rush them through just because they have a big name or any of these things, yeah? And that is exactly what you wanted. You wanted us to restore sanity. And I want to thank you for supporting, well, I think the country more than anything else. It's not the central bank. We are KYMs, so we do the work as agreed. But I think I feel better that this thing now has started. That train now has begun to do what it should do. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Here.
Another round. Let me take the honorable member at the back. Kiari, I'll come to you. I'll come here, take Mama Nairobi. There's a gentleman who had actually stood up, the honorable member, in a dark suit. I'm sorry, I can't see that far.
Waluke is here.
Okay, and the last will give the honorable member lady on the front. Where is Waluke?
I'm here, Speaker. This side.
Okay, you'll be number 5.
Okay, thanks.
So let's start with number 1.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you,
Number
Bwana
1
Speaker.
from here.
Yes.
Come to Mama Nairobi. Go to the gentleman. Is it Okukaunya? Yes. Sorry, I had not noticed. And then the lady on the front, the honorable member, and Honorable Waluke, who are solicited to be noticed. Yes, Governor.
Thank you, Bwana Governor. Thank you, Bwana
them.
Speaker. I am Kirima Moses.
And because of the interest, please try and just ask one question each.
I will squeeze my 3
so
questions
that we
into one.
give room to everybody else.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Bwana Honorable Speaker. I will squeeze my 3 questions into one. I'm Moses Kirima from Central Imenti, Meru District in Meru County. Now, Bwana Governor, my simple question, of which I would like to squeeze the 3 to be one, is that since you took over as a central banking governor, of which it happened at the time when I have been working as an advocate, you came up with some policies which are not so much business friendly. And one of them, even though it has been asked, I would wish to just to reiterate the same so that you can give us a concrete answer, whereby this idea of 1 million, our people have been business people for quite a period and they have been operating with large amount of money. Now, is it not discouraging our people from saving because they know that they will not be able to withdraw the same to carry out their businesses and they are keeping the money in their houses? Because that's where they can be able to access it without hindrance. That's one. Then the other one is this one of whereby this policy of anti-bank laundering money. This one, it came to Parliament as a bill, and we are so much aware there is some countries which are called safe havens, whereby they have been made rich by having savings from outside countries. And ours is that now we have squeezed those savers from outside, and we cannot allow people to save from outside in Kenya because there is that policy, especially of advocates, client confidentiality. Is it not that we are discouraging those savers from outside? Yet, in European countries, you can get there and save a lot of money as much as you wish. Is it not a policy from outside which is against us? Then, to conclude, we have the academic idea of economic development in Kenya, where GDP is looking so good. But Bwana Governor, if you happen to go to the rural areas, you'll find that people have no money. Money is not circulating in the people's pockets. People have no money. And we're becoming more academic than really when it comes to money circulating in the rural areas.
Thank you.
All, Bwana Governor. That's all.
Next, Mheshimiwa Pasaris, please restrict to one question or one comment in your interventions, because the interest is very vast.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Yesterday, His Excellency, the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, was on an interview, and he said that we had a big crisis on pending bills amounting to over 500 billion, and he was going to ask for Central Bank to approve floating a bond for 500 billion to pay the pending bills. Now, for me, much as I know that a lot of people are owed money, the question that I have in my head is that we put a law in procurement that no government entity can procure without having a budget, allocating the budget, forming a tender committee. So for me, if we actually look at 500 billion in pending bills, then my question is, this money was approved, this money was allocated, that's why the expenditure happened, and then it wasn't paid to the relevant people. So where is this initial 500 billion that should have paid these pending bills? And would you support a 500 billion pending bills bond for the government and the impact it would have on us as a country?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Honorable Kaunya.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Governor, thank you for the very elaborate presentation. But my question is on this digital currency as in relation to the devaluation of the shilling versus the dollar. You did indicate the dollar, which you didn't want to come out very clearly, the political aspect. To what extent would the bitcoins or digital currencies help us to resolve that devaluation that really is affecting the cost of living, devaluation of the shilling against the dollar from time to time? And what is the status of our adoption of the digital currencies? Thank you.
The Honorable
Thank you, Mr.
Distinguished
Speaker.
Lady.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bwana Governor, my name is Rosa Buyu from Kisumu West. Bwana Governor, a lot of Kenyans are apprehensive and actually highly fearful that there's going to be a shutdown by government. Why? Because many of our respected leaders have actually pronounced that government accounts only has 93 million. I'd just like to have a clarification from you on behalf of those Kenyans. Is this just hot air or it's fact? Thank you.
Okay. Honorable Waluke, the fifth.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, sir. My question to Governor is that before I ask the question, you are not coming out clearly answering the questions. I want you to tell us about the economy of this country, whether it is doing well improving or tickling down. Two, I want you to talk about the debt ceiling also. How much we borrowed as a country and how much have we paid as today. I think those are enough.
Thank you, Governor. Now we go. Governor, we have taken 5.
Okay, fine.
You can
so
now answer.
let me take this. I thought there was somebody else, but that's okay. So beginning with the first one, and if you don't mind, I'll try and move a little faster.
Yes.
The member from Meru. So business and friendly policies, and in particular, the question that was also asked by Honorable Ichung'wah. I think the point here is we cannot, we cannot continue doing things the old way. Yeah, the cash, etc. The world is moving ahead. And one of the big issues, years ago, we never had this problem. Now we have a problem of money laundering, illicit transactions, etc. Those are big things. Years ago, remember years ago, you could even be smoking now where you are. Yeah? But you don't. Even outside, they'll probably arrest you if you go out there and begin smoking. Now, smoking is a small, let's say, violation. Actually, money laundering is a bigger violation. And money laundering comes with other issues. As they say, these things, it's like problems. Problems don't come singly. They come in multiple at once. So if you begin with money laundering, if you allow money laundering, etc., you can imagine that all the other vices will come with it. And I don't mean vices in a moral way. I mean it in the way that we as a society know it, we as a Kenyan society, right? Like now we are talking about these girls that are going to Saudi Arabia and coming back in difficulties, whatever that means. I mean, if that's not a problem that we are willing to sort of make ours and solve, then we have a problem. So I'm just making the point here that the reason to do these things, the bottom line here is to make the environment safer for all of us. Now, it may require that, when you go, in the past you'd put in your money in the bank and there were no questions. Now they need to know what your line of business is. I keep telling you, wait till you become a PEP. I think Speaker, you are PEP. You are like me. PEP is politically exposed persons. Most of you are politically exposed, but for the banks, somehow they don't always take you as such. But if you're politically exposed, and I also see another politically exposed person there, Ambassador, and the point is that just because of that, you are required to, when you go out of the country, you open an account or whatever, or you're making your family is making a transaction, they have to go through many hoops just to show that you are not, let's say, involved in some sort of illicit transaction. So I think the point here is we need to understand that and also make it friendly for you. And that I accept. Meaning we need to improve the system, as I explained in the answer, so that it is not a sort of a punishment. It's not something that is, let's say, that the banks are using to punish you and you have to go through all these hoops, particularly because they know you. The banker should know you. I mean, there are 3 people that generally we used to say people need to know. One is your banker, second is your priest, yeah? And the third is your doctor, I hope, yeah? Not your lawyer, but your doctor. So those are people that you should be sort of working with closely and they know you quite well. So I hope that makes, now in terms of businesses coming into Kenya, we want good businesses to come that are founded on good business practices, etc. What we don't want is businesses that are supported by sort of illicit financial flows. Those we don't need. It's better if we die poor than get involved in those things. And I think there are many things that we should respect. We have a lot of self-respect and sort of say, well, we can do better than that. We don't need to sort of link up with people that are involved in this business in order to move forward. In terms of the other issue of you talked about the economic growth being academic, etc., I do accept that. But I thought I explained the point that what you are seeing is this sort of dichotomy of, let's say, the inequality that applies at times. I gave that example of, some of us may be doing very well, while others, our people may not be doing so well. There are some sectors that have gone under, right? You can imagine, for instance, there was a whole discussion about coffee. You talk to a coffee farmer, and you'll know how they feel, yeah? Because there was a time that coffee was king, but now they feel that it's not, or even some of the tea farmers. So now, those are just examples that maybe that closer to me in terms of top of mind. But I'm sure there are many other examples of maybe sectors and people are doing certain things and now they cannot do it, and so you see that hardship, and that's why they say hakuna pesa mashinani, because of those sort of considerations. But I think that's where we come in. That's a challenge we have. I think we should not shrink from the challenge. We should, if anything, face it and resolve it for the benefit of our population. Honorable from Nairobi, thank you for your question. Pending bills, as I said, pending bills, going back to MV Kenya, is a big problem. But we have to deal with it holistically. There's no point in paying all the pending bills, and then we end up creating more. So first thing is to stop creating new pending bills. And then you also know that pending bills in the past, I was in Treasury back in 85. Yeah, young economist then. And there was that problem of pending bills. And I remember, we even had some money that was supposed to go into pending bills. We had people like Halaki, I think that was the name of the FS at the time. Yeah. But the point I'm making is that why hasn't it worked? Because at times the money that is put out for pending bills goes to do other things. Yeah, so we are too good for our own good. I think you get my point. And so the pending bills becomes this balloon of our excesses. Now, we can blame Treasury, but actually they are not the only ones to blame. Counties and also the ministries are part of the problem. Actually, one of the issues that we need to resolve is when they get allocation to pay, 100 million particular projects or some of those funds at times are being diverted to other things. So that's where the issues are. But I think this has to be done correctly. I don't think the issue is just saying, okay, it's X amount, let's create a bond and resolve it. Because you don't have a contract as such with those pending bill people, yeah? And what you may start as 500 or X may end up being 2X. And that is why actually in the last 2 years or so, there has been a project that was trying to deal with the pending bills, and the controller of budget had to go through them and sign off on them and assure the world that these are true pending bills and now they created. The trouble is she began to run into things and say, wait a second, I paid for that. What happened here? And the thing, obviously the money was diverted some other place. So I think the point here is we have to deal with the pending bills holistically. Whether 500 billion as a bond, all I'll say is last year, our domestic financing was 690 billion. 690, that's what the central bank was required to raise in domestic borrowing for the budget in the financial year. How does that compare to 500? Actually, we didn't even manage 680, we ended up at 600. So I think the point is, I would want us to have a conversation, so that we can put our 2 cents in the mix and sort of get a solution to this big problem. But I think it has to be resolved. Remember, it was the anchor that I talked about is one of those things. But I think it has to be done, all of us, together. And I hope that answers your question. Then other questions, maybe I should take Mheshimiwa from Kisumu, Kebue. You asked about the 93 million and whether it's hot air and things like that. I think the point to make, you're probably alluding to what is known as the cash flow of the government that I know was circulating over social media this weekend. And that cash flow, the government is required to publish it every single month, okay? So we see it every month. The point is that it shows the inflows, so it's a bit like, you know, you are in a, how much came in, how much did you spend, and how much remained. So if you look, there are certain revenues. If you see, there are certain expenditures. And then you have the bottom line, which is what is the balance, which is that number. The fact that it is 93, in my view, is neither here nor there. Why? Because there may have been expenditures that were needed that maybe were held back in terms of pending bills or any of these other things. You understand? So this line or this table taken by itself doesn't give you a complete picture. But I think it tells you that the government had certain expenditures, it got certain flows, including loans, and it paid those expenditures, and the balance was X, or whatever the number is, the 93. Now, I'm sorry. What? It's not there? Oh, hot air. I thought that we have suddenly switched to CJ Martha Come's language. I'm not going to go there. But I think the point I'm making is that, thank you, but I think the point I'm making here is that I think the more fundamental issue is the charts I gave you, the deficit, because that tells you that we are actually spending more, living beyond our means. And you can live beyond your means for a period of time, just like you borrow for the car, yeah, or borrow for a house. So you're spending beyond your means for a period of time, but you know you're going to repay it. So it has to be, so the three of them have to be seen together. And, but I do wish you to ask that question to the PS Treasury. I'm sure he's an accountant. He'll give you a better answer to the question than I did, but that's the way I look at it, okay? But then on other questions, the Bitcoin and digital currency versus, you know, it doesn't matter about, I mean, it doesn't relate to depreciation, meaning the two are not related. The Bitcoin, basically there are two things. It started off and they began telling us that this is going to be the next best thing in terms of payments platform. You know, it's very difficult to do more than 7 transactions an hour on Bitcoin, just because of the way it is. So it's no longer that. What it is now, it is sort of an investment, you know, a sort of, so you buy it and then it's an investment vehicle. So I don't think the issue is Bitcoin as such, but maybe more generally you're asking about digital currencies. The way we see digital currencies is the most important question we have is what problem are they resolving? You know, so in our economy, what problem are they resolving? Are they better vehicles for, let's say, payments, you know, transactions? And the answer is no. Are they better in terms of whatever the problems it is, security, more than, let's say, your bank account or any of these things? And the answer is no. So we see it as sort of something that maybe is being hyped, but we do need to look at it carefully and figure out whether it will resolve a particular problem or not. Now, I do know you're under a lot of pressure from some of these people that are, let's say, the the people that are pushing these things, because for them it is good. I can assure you I have a lot of people that have been pushing me to put our reserves in Bitcoin. You know, can you imagine that? If I did that, please take me to committee and throw away the key. Because I would have been out of my mind. That sort of craziness, I think you understand. And maybe you can do it with your own money and play around with it, yeah? But even your own money, I'm sure your family will not let you do it, because it's a crazy sort of, very volatile, you know? So I hope we understand each other on this. Last point, I don't remember his name, but he was emphatic that I'm not speaking clearly. I didn't know I wasn't speaking clearly. Is the economy doing well? My answer is there are certain aspects of it that are going very well, yeah, taken globally. And we talked about some of the sectors. Yeah, I didn't really talk about all of them, but there's some sectors that are doing well. Post-COVID, you know, have been hit hard, quite hard. You know, the economy took, you know, two huge blows, COVID and then the Ukraine, yeah? All this Ukraine, and I mean, I'm talking of the price surge, etc. Relative to other countries, we've done very well. I just came back from Mauritius, where I met with, thank you, where we met with 20 other governors of Africa. And basically, where we were hanging out, they asked, hey, so Kenya, you're doing pretty well, aren't you? And I think it is true. But on the other hand, we cannot be satisfied with that. But also, at a macro level, we are doing well. We still have reserves. We still have credit is growing, etc. We've recovered from some of those things. The price of oil has more than, I mean, it was $30 back in, $30 a barrel back in March of 2020. And now it is at 3 times that. I mean, just think of that. And still we are running, and I think we are still on our feet. I think we should be proud of that. Now, having said that, there are still some problems in the system, right? And a lot of them are the ones that were being mentioned a moment ago. There are some sectors or some of our population are not getting the benefits coming to them. And we talked about that. So that is, I think, the issue. Of course, there are the bigger things that government has been unable to deal with some of the things that we generally accept are government services, health, education, or is struggling to deal with those. I mean, when you go on a road and it's potholes all over, I mean, you say, surely, or, you know, in your own constituency, they're even planting bananas on the road because they're so upset, you know, with the state of the roads, etc. I think the point I'm making here is there's other things that need to be dealt with. And so we cannot minimize this and say we are okay, growth is X%, we are happy, mambo ni sawa. No, I think we have a lot of work. And frankly, that's why we come to work every day. That's why we come to work every day. If it was not because of that challenge, then we wouldn't go to work. And there are 50 million Kenyans that are looking to us, hoping that we can provide them with opportunities. I want to finish with one last thing, Chair, yes, which is youth. We haven't said anything about youth, but what do youth want? They don't want a handout. Of course, they're going to reach for the handout if you give it to them. Yeah? But that's not what they should get. They should get opportunities. Provide them with opportunities. Figure out how to create those opportunities. I gave you the example of the chicken farmers, right? I think you can think of other ways. They don't necessarily, those opportunities may not be in an office, you know, behind a desk or things like that. But I think there's a lot that they need. Opportunities, opportunities, opportunities. That is, to me, the rallying call for what we should do with the youth. But anyway, it's in your hands.
Thank you, Governor. Honorable members, I want to terminate the engagement with the governor now.
Thank you.
Because listening, 1 minute, Honorable Carrier, listening to our interventions, I think the streak is the same. And we've got the point. Allow me to call our next president. Okay, Kiaria, you'll be the very last.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My hand had been up from the very first round, and I'm glad I caught your eye. Governor, this question is straight to the point. We have companies that are registered as communication companies that are doubling up as banks. As it is right now, they fall and are regulated under the Communications Authority, but because they are also transacting money, there are some regulations that come from central bank that they depend on. My question is, from where you sit as central bank, how can this parliament help you with legislation? And would that legislation mean that we break these telecommunication companies into different operating units where the communication sits on its own and they are regulated by Communications Authority, and they have a unit that is transacting in money that will be regulated specifically from central bank? Is this a law that is required from Parliament, or is it central bank regulations that will separate these operations of the telcos? Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. So I think here, before I answer your question, this is where you see if all the arms of government are working together, we can go very far. Legislation, the judiciary, the executive, I don't know where we are. We are an agency of the executive, of course, in this thing. Because the law actually is there. And I would want you to ask me that question in January. Because actually, we want to be sure that those sort of issues are dealt with. We have to understand where we came from. Meaning, when we started off, we didn't know what we were dealing with. Remember, we were like the first car down the road, so nobody knows how this thing, but we've done a lot to regulate all these payment service providers. Today, for instance, you can go and check on our website and you'll see the names of all the payment service providers. We were not doing that before. You can see who it is, etc. Anyway, the point I'm making is that is one important thing to secure the operations, let's say, on the money side. So I think we are on our way in this path. We also know the history, meaning you are very concerned. I'm talking of the 12th Parliament. They were very concerned about some of those things. But I think we are now, let's say, much further ahead in this thing. So if you would just be patient, ask the question. Next time I see you, ask me that question, hopefully before the end of the year, but definitely by January. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor. Can we put our hands together for the Governor, please?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this engagement, and I look forward to meeting you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Honorable members, our next speaker is the Principal Secretary for Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Macharia Kamau. He's going to speak to us on diplomacy, international relations, and the role of a legislator in the diplomatic arena. Ambassador Macharia's bio is available in the booklet. You can read through. He's a consummate diplomat, having represented Kenya in, among other places, the UN as the permanent rep for quite a number of years. Ambassador Macharia, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much. Maybe I ask all of you to stand up just for 1 second, just to allow your blood to move a little bit, so that kidogo munyoroshe mwili. Ndio. Bari, mheshimiwa. Asanteni sana. Yes, let us take our seats, please. Thank you very much. Let me also begin by recognizing the speaker. If somebody is the Donyo